Today we're going to work on strengthening our wrists. But first, let's take a moment to settle into our bodies and check in with ourselves. Close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. Sit up nice and tall. And begin to let the breath flow in and flow out. Just give yourself a moment to come into the body, out of the mind, and shift from that mode of doing into a mode of just being. And when you're ready, blink the eyes open. We use our wrists a lot in yoga, and we've been doing a lot to stretch the wrists, but it's also important to strengthen them. This comes into effect whenever we're doing downward facing dog, when we're in plank, and definitely if we're doing some heavier inversions. We want to make sure that we've prepared the wrists properly. So let's begin. Bring the arms out in front of you with the palms face down. And you can kind of bend the elbows softly if that feels good. So the forearms are going to be aligned with the floor. And then we're just going to begin to flip the palms up, fingers pointing to the sky, and bring them back in line with the forearms. You can do this for as long as it feels good for you. Sometimes I count reps and maybe do 10 of these. Other times I count maybe time or breaths. I may do this for 5 or 6 breaths, maybe 30 seconds. Whatever feels right for you. And then we'll bring the wrist back to neutral. And we're going to bring the fingertips to point down to the floor. So the palms face the body. And then back up to neutral in line with the forearms. And you can move at your own pace, your own speed here. Find a cadence that feels right for you. And this shouldn't be painful. So we want to do this to strengthen the wrists, and it can be intense. But if you feel any sharp pains or it doesn't feel right, you definitely want to back away from the movement. And we'll do a few more of these. Sometimes people like to incorporate breath of fire or pranayama practices with wrist strengthening movements. And then we're going to straighten the arms out in front of us. And we're going to squeeze the fingers into a ball. And then open the fingers and spread them wide. We're going to keep going a little faster. And these can start to get pretty intense pretty quickly, especially if you have carpal tunnel, arthritis, anything going on in the wrists. You'll feel this sooner rather than later. And then when you're ready, send the arms straight up overhead and continue. Kind of breathe into the wrists. And when you're ready, take the arms out to the sides. And there's no magic number, magic length of time. The more often you do these, probably the longer that you'll go. And depending on what you're planning on doing with your wrists and how much strengthening you need to prepare them, you can kind of design your own practice. And when you're finished, roll the wrists out. And we're going to come on to hands and knees just for a moment. And if you need a blanket or anything underneath the knees here, feel free to set that up. So we're going to begin in traditional tabletop. You want to bring the knees right underneath the hips, and the wrists should be in line right underneath the shoulders. And we're going to grip the mat with our fingertips. And as you grip the mat with the fingertips, you're going to see that the palm lifts just a little bit, and you're creating like a little bit of space for your carpals. So what we're going to do here, take an inhale, engage the core, and then lift the palms, the wrists, away from the mat while you keep the fingers pressing in. And maybe do 5 of these just like this, fingers pointing forward. And then we'll take the fingers to point out to the side. Continue with the grip of the finger pad. So the finger pads kind of grip down and in. And then we're going to lift the palm of the hand right away from the mat 5 times. And finally, we're going to turn the fingers inwards so that they're pointing almost towards each other, but not completely towards each other, kind of towards the diagonal of the mat. Grip the finger pads into the mat and then begin to lift the palm away about 5 times, whatever feels good to you. And then when you're finished, stretch the wrists out. So one hand at a time, you'll bring the palm to face up and kind of lean back. Get a nice stretch through the wrist. And then that hand can come palm facing down. And we'll take the opposite hand, fingertips pointing towards the body, palm face up. Shift the hips back. And release. And you can also take some wrist circles here if that feels good. Thank you for sharing your practice with me today.